Power always comes with a title, right? President, prime minister. But what if a leader's most powerful move is to actually redefine that title? Today, we're exploring the story behind Narendra Modi's self-proclaimed role as India's prime servant.
And this quote right here, this is where it all started. This wasn't just some clever turn of phrase. This single sentence, said right after his big 2014 election win, was a very deliberate move. It was a signal that his leadership, at least how he wanted to present it, was going to be defined not by ruling, but by serving.
And really, this is the heart of the story we're unpacking today. The journey from Swayam Sevak, which means volunteer, all the way to Pradhan Sevak, or prime servant. It's a narrative that completely reframes what it even means to hold the top job in the world's largest democracy. So you have to ask, why this specific term? The sources we've looked into suggest it was a really calculated choice. It was a way to frame his leadership not in terms of raw authority and power, but in terms of duty and service to India's 1.4 billion people. The message was crystal clear. I am here to serve, not to rule.
But where does this whole idea of service even come from? Well, to get that, we need to rewind and go way back to his early life. The story that's presented is that this period of struggle and learning is what really shaped his entire perspective on what it means to govern. So this timeline here gives you a quick snapshot. You see his childhood helping his father at their tea stall, then his early youth joining the RSS as a volunteer, and later as a young man leaving home to travel all across the country. It was that journey, so the story goes, that gave him this ground-level, unfiltered view of India's incredible diversity and all of its shared challenges. And a lot of this narrative is grounded in very personal anecdotes. For example, Modi has often talked about his mother's struggles, like how she had to wash dishes in other people's homes just to help make ends meet. This first-hand experience with poverty, he claims, gave him a very direct, personal understanding of what hardship feels like.
Okay, so how does a young volunteer who sold tea at a train station climb all the way to the highest political office in the biggest democracy on earth? Let's trace that journey from the grassroots right up to the corridors of power. So after years as a volunteer, he officially stepped into politics with the BJP. His biggest test, you could say, was as the chief minister of Gujarat, a job he held for over a decade. And it was there that he developed what became known as the Gujarat model, a style of governance really focused on attracting investment, building up infrastructure, and just pushing for economic growth. And then, 2014, a absolutely pivotal year. He led his party to a massive historic victory, and he made that huge leap from being a state leader to the national stage. And this is when that Pradhan Sevak identity was really introduced to the entire country.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This is the central argument you'll find in the source material, that his biggest policies aren't just political moves. They are deeply, deeply rooted in and are presented as the direct results of his own life experiences.
This slide pretty much lays out the framework that's presented in the sources. On one side, you have the personal experience of hardship, and on the other, you have a national policy designed to fix that exact problem. Let's look at a couple of really clear examples of this in action. All right. First, let's go back to that memory of his mother. Modi has talked about watching her cook on a traditional wood stove, which, by the way, is a daily reality for millions of women in rural India. And he saw the toll that inhaling all that smoke took on her health. A really personal observation that, according to this narrative, would later spark a huge national policy. And what was that policy? The Ujjwala Yojana. This was a massive government program designed to give clean cooking fuel, we're talking LPG gas cylinders, to women in poor households, directly tackling that health hazard he says he saw as a kid. And the scale of this thing is just mind-boggling. According to the source, over 10 crore, that's 100 million women and their families have benefited from this scheme. That's 100 million families trading in smoky kitchens for cleaner, safer fuel. Okay. Another key example that's often pointed to goes back to his time as a Swayamsevak. The RSS really emphasizes discipline and doing things for yourself, and that included simple stuff like cleaning your own room. It was a foundational habit of personal cleanliness and responsibility. So how do you take that personal habit and turn it into a national policy? Well, you get the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, or the Clean India Mission. It was one of his first big campaigns, and it was all about turning that personal principle of cleanliness into a massive, nationwide public movement. A huge goal of the mission was to tackle open defecation, which is a major public health issue. The government reports that over 12 crore, that's 120 million toilets were built, with a special focus on providing safety and dignity for women in rural areas.
Now, these individual welfare programs are all presented as building blocks for an even bigger economic vision for the country, Atmanirbhar Bharat, which translates to a self-reliant India.
Now, it's really important to understand what this means. The vision isn't about being isolationist or cutting India off from the world. It's framed as making India strong enough to handle its own needs, but also capable enough to be a dependable partner for the rest of the world. You'll often hear this linked to the ancient Indian idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. And this whole vision is built on 5 main pillars. First, an economy that takes quantum jumps, not just tiny, slow steps. Second, modern infrastructure that becomes the new identity of India. Third, a system that is totally technology-driven. Fourth, leveraging India's vibrant demography, its young population, as a source of energy. And finally, number 5, boosting demand and supply to really get the economy firing. So, when you step back and look at all of this, what's the big picture that starts to emerge? It's this incredibly powerful connection that is constantly being drawn between a leader's personal story and their political actions on a national scale. This entire narrative arc, right, from a humble volunteer to the prime servant, is built to show governance not as a quest for power, but as just the next chapter in a lifelong mission of service. Every single policy is framed as an answer to a problem that he has personally seen and felt. And the sources we reviewed point to what they see as real, tangible results of this approach. A key statistic that gets mentioned a lot is this one, that in the last 10 years, 25 crore, or 250 million people, have been lifted out of multidimensional poverty. That's a huge number, and it's presented as the ultimate proof that the service-first style of governance works. Which leaves us with a final, pretty big question. We've seen how one leader's life story is tangled up in their whole governing narrative. It really makes you think, for any leader, anywhere in the world, how much does their personal story truly shape the destiny of a nation? And, on the flip side, how much of that story is a carefully crafted political tool?